Okay, we're going to jump in. Very excited about this one. I think now that Notion AI has been updated and it's been out for a few weeks now, got a brief beta testing a few weeks prior just to get a sense of what's working. What does this mean for day-to-day work? So we're going to get into some things that have worked to go from generic overall responses to very specific targeted responses that work for you personally. And this could be on anything from project management to content creation. I think a big goal today is really thinking through specific workflows that we are doing on a day-to-day basis and start there to think through, okay, how would I structure these instructions? What am I giving access to? What am I pointing Notion AI to? Just to make sure that it's reading the right information, it's taking anything that you've already created or produced, and hopefully we spend less time editing or revising or asking follow-up questions to Notion AI in the process. And at the end of the day, saving a lot of time. So I think that's a big goal for today. And also be sharing some resources to hopefully remix. But if we haven't met, I'm Dave Desespres, Notion Ambassador, Certified Notion Consultant. Got to speak at Make with Notion a couple weeks ago, which was really cool and an awesome experience working with Jenny and Alejandra, who we took on the community session. And yeah, it was a great experience all around. And girl dad of 2 girls, 6 and 3. And as I mentioned, I'm based in Miami, Florida. I put together this personalization guide, and this is a combination of checklist, instructions, starter questions to hopefully get us from 0 to 1 if we're creating our instructions brand new. And if we've already created them, maybe there's some things in here that we may have not included or could benefit from including in our AI instructions. So things that we're covering: what's changed, why create personalized instructions for Notion AI. I'm actually gonna have you all pick what demo we're choosing. So I've prepped 3 different ones, which was a little extra work, but just wanted to make sure that it's as useful as possible. And a few kind of closing tips going forward as we're hopefully trying to get some more use out of AI. Quick poll, if you could drop 1 through 4 in the chat. Okay, so we are probably exactly in the middle. This should be fun in terms of getting use for all of this. I'll just say as a disclaimer, I was really not using Notion AI at all up until maybe 3 months ago. It just wasn't a part of my workflow. I had prompts set up with Claude for writing, with ChatGPT for, I would use voice mode a lot going on walks. I was pretty used to those workflows happening outside of Notion. And I'm always a little skeptical of trying to do too much in one tool, just because A, there's so many tools out there that are specialized and really good at what they do. And B, we always hit some limitations trying to kind of cram things into one space. And at least for me personally, like to have kind of separate spaces. I'd say all of that kind of went out the window with the latest Notion AI updates, especially when we get into custom agents. I'll say a lot of what we're talking about today should set us up for getting up and running as soon as possible when custom agents come out. So this is thinking through how do we set very specific specialized instructions for individual agents to take on tasks, which we'll take a sneak peek at. But a lot of this is useful today. And I think the big difference, just to zoom out a little bit, between Notion AI today and when custom agents comes out is we'll have more granular controls over separating out specific prompts. If we're creating content, you want to give it access to specific databases. If we're doing project management work, you want to give it access to tasks, projects, and meetings. So this really just helps it get more useful out of the box without having to tweak it too much. Want to just quickly recap on what's new with Notion AI, just so that we set some context if we didn't catch the Make with Notion keynote or some of the bigger updates. Number 1, we can tailor our agent to respond to specific pieces of information, to respond in a certain tone. Prior to Make with Notion, we had Nosy in the bottom right-hand corner. We could ask it questions. It had access to our workspace, but that was sort of it. We could reference pages or databases in the prompt, but was pretty limited. So what happened as a result were we tended to get a little bit more generic responses, whereas now the more we set up custom instructions, the more effective or accurate our responses are going to get. Second, we could, again, define these specific rules. What do we want it to say? How do we want it to say it? What information do we want it to reference? We'll get into that in an example. And a big change, it can now create pages, create entire databases, update data in bulk. I've noticed the limit is usually like 20 to 25 pages at a time, especially when it's dealing with larger databases. The last one is just kind of better summarizing from existing information in your workspace. So those are some of the high level updates that weren't as easy or as possible before. And with that said, custom agents are pretty much going to upend day-to-day work for most of us, at least that's my opinion. For those of us that use it, for a lot of the reasons that I mentioned before that I was planning to mention here, but I just got ahead of myself. The thing that I'm probably most excited about as a solo consultant is this is getting really close to mimicking scaling a team. When we think about, at least personally, there's client management, there's project management, there's business development, content creation, lead generation, all of these things bundled up into one. And also trying to do that in essentially a 30-hour work week as a dad, trying to make sure that I'm tuning out by at least in the early afternoon. So this, at least even with automations and previous tools, was really hard to do. Whereas I think now, not only is it getting easier, but it's getting easier to avoid creating slop in the process and making sure that if we are creating content or writing proposals, that it is in your voice by referencing things that you've written or you've created or talked about. So that's always top of mind in terms of like, does this sound like me? How can I personalize this a little bit more, or as much as possible, really? So we're going to get into a demo, but a couple notes on what we benefit from creating personalized instructions. Again, we're matching our voice goals, standards. We're getting faster results. So the more guidance we give Notion AI, the more accurate it's going to respond because it knows where to go to find information and it knows what you're asking. And we're also giving it boundaries. So if I don't know if we track everything in Notion, but my Notion workspace is, I don't want to say disaster, but it's pretty close in terms of demo pages and databases all over the place. So giving it clear boundaries as to what to look for, just so that we avoid it getting confused. The benefit of prompting is we write something once detailed and we save time having to write that moving forward. I want us to start thinking about a specific workflow that's top of mind for us that is taking up a lot of time or is very manual, that maybe we've started to streamline or automate using automation tools or AI tools to use as an example, so that hopefully we, after this session, go in and set up instructions on that specific workflow to be able to test it out. This is a very iterative process. You're going to create a prompt. It's going to throw a page in the wrong database or format it in a way that you don't want. So it's very much a process of refining it. But I think the big goal is, as we refine that one instructions page, we have that forever moving forward, and we're getting smarter over time. So we are going to pick our path. We're going to get into a proposal. I'll say while we're here, Notion AI meeting notes was another feature that I wasn't really using up until a month ago or so. For context, I had been using Google Meet and Gemini's meeting notes, which was really good. One thing that's still pretty important for me, but I've managed without, is video of client meetings, just because we're doing a lot of screen sharing. We're doing a lot of understanding where team members are getting tripped up in Notion. So being able to watch those, even if at a faster speed, just helps to jog my memory versus reading through a wall of text. But I think the benefits of Notion AI meeting notes lately have definitely outweighed the limitations. So yeah, would definitely recommend it. I'm going to open a demo conversation of a call. This is a little bit of a version of what I'm doing with custom agents, but will still be helpful for using Notion AI. So one thing that's worked well is having a page that works as our instructions page. For context, if we haven't done this, if you open Nosy and you click into his little avatar, you'll see here, if you haven't set this up, we'll have a button that says set up instructions. If we're feeling spicy, we can add our little pepper hat. And for setup instructions, we can use one of the base templates. These are really just about tone and how you want it to interact with you, but not really specific in terms of what you want it to do. So yeah, Vid Diesel, that's my video guy. But with, if we want to use an existing page, I'm going to select Dave's agents, and that way you'll see a couple things. Number one, you'll see this blue banner similar to sharing a public page, just to know that this is the page that Notion AI is referencing. And also you'll see a little AI instructions note on the sidebar, just as a little reminder. So you got a few hints that this is being used. So we have a few things in here: the social media helper, the proposal writer, and I think I have another one are in my profile in Notion Marketplace. If we dive into the proposal writer, there's a few things in here, and you'll notice the formatting is very similar to the instructions page template, but a couple things we want. Number one, first and foremost, what is the purpose of these instructions? Like, what do you want it to do? Very important if you want it to be creating pages in a specific area of your workspace or a database, making sure that you're noting that. So we're going to be creating a proposal and adding it to this proposals database. Next, I think when it comes to identity and style, this is something I noticed when I didn't have this, it would sound a little bit more robotic. And I think it took some time to personalize. I try to be like as to the point as possible in proposals. I think when I started, I was just a lot more long-winded, but I think it's just like overview of our discovery call. What are the pain points? What is our approach? I like to start every new project with a workflow audit. So I tend to expand on that. And I also don't give clients a detailed roadmap initially until after we've completed the audit for a few reasons. Number one, once we start working together, we usually find that the priorities are actually very different. Sometimes the scope is very different. Ultimately, we just uncover there's usually one or two things that we have to address, in which case the goal of the workflow audit is to put together a workspace outline, a sprint roadmap, so that we have a clear idea of how long is this going to take, what are the goals for each sprint, which are usually 2 weeks. So that's very particular to how I'm writing proposals for clients. So I think in our case, when we think about workspace context, this is getting into the proposal overview. So as I mentioned, what are we including in here? What are the challenges? Approach. Preliminary project outline, I try to highlight that this is preliminary, so it's subject to change, but just to give a sense of what does this look like. Table, which I have like placeholders, and then we'll update the numbers based on the scope and the size of the team, and just some notes on quality standards. Okay, so you got the gist of that. So we have a transcript here. We would probably have this directly in the meeting notes block, but just for demo purposes, I kind of added one here. We're just going to open Nosy here. So first, I do want to make sure that we are referencing Dave's agents. So we have that. Okay, so I'm going to say, write a proposal. I'm just going to say reference Dave's proposal writer to write a proposal. And just in case, we might not need this, but I'm just going to add the page to proposals. So we have, which one is it? I think it's that one. Okay. I'm a little nervous that this doesn't work, so I'm just going to add like a little bit more detail. It's a couple extra words. Hopefully it's not too inconvenient, but we'll see what that does. So the goal here is it should take the call and create a new proposal page. We'll see what's happening here. Okay, so we created a new page, and a couple things to note. This is in our proposals database. It added the prepared for automatically. It didn't have any date information. So just gonna give it like a quick scan. Our approach, workflow audit, preliminary outline. Okay, so I'd say this is maybe like 80% of how I like to structure it. I'd say one thing that it does love to do is bullet points, like everywhere and anywhere. So I might add an addition to the instructions to say, hey, try to avoid bullet points or only use them in these specific areas. So something to keep in mind there. Diana's question while we're here, not clear which agent we're chatting with. That's another reason why I bundled everything into the Dave's agents page and then just reference the specific instructions in the prompt. I think we could jump into one other, before we get into that, couple notes, because the personalization guide has 2 versions. For the 1s and maybe some of the 2s in the group, I'd recommend starting with the starter version. There's a lot to fill out here, but I think the main difference is we're not getting into as much details with creating examples for how we wanted to respond, or a lot of the details that we might not have yet, but specifically for understanding what is the role of the agent for you personally. How do you work? What do you work on? Who do you work with? How do you like to communicate? These are things that it's helpful to get responses on a page either way, regardless of what we're doing. So at least we can start there in terms of when we're asking Notion AI and we're defaulting to this instructions page, we should be getting more personalized responses. One other thing to note in the guide, this goes for both, anywhere that's blue, we definitely want to link any existing pages or databases that we're using that have real data so that it could read those databases and pages and craft more detailed responses. It's going to default to having access to the entire workspace, but at least you're giving it some direction in terms of where you want it to focus. So something to keep in mind there. Okay, we're going to jump to the creating a newsletter and see how that goes. A couple things here. This one I had to expand on a little bit because I technically have 3 newsletters, which is fun to manage. But here, a lot of similarities and overlaps, but the tone of voice and the format, like, do we tend to have spicy takes in our newsletters, or do we tend to be more like referencing data or news, things like that? So anything that's specific to what we're talking about, how we want to talk about it, and I think how we want our brand to be interpreted is pretty important. So for context, the productivity paper newsletter ends up being a lot of Notion news and updates, but just also general thoughts on productivity and do these methods still work, or does it make sense to rediscover or retry older productivity methods? In this case, it's highlighting that there are several different newsletters. There's different purposes for each. So I'll add the link to the newsletter instructions guide in the chat. Just as an aside, I came up with these myself. I did not ask AI for these names. Okay, this was a very long brainstorming session that I had to come up with these names. And I have some other custom agents that I have in the bag somewhere with other names. We're going to go back to our newsletter idea. This one is actually something I'm curious about. I think with the added functionality of agents and Notion AI, have started time tracking again and want to write a little bit about the experience of what's worked with time tracking, why time track as a consultant when I'm not billing hourly. We're going to see how this works, and I'm going to add the new Jackman. Oh, shoot. Great. Okay. Bear with me for like a minute. I'm going to use Whisperflow, which is like my dictation tool. If you haven't used it or some of the other ones, I think Monologue is another one. I use it for like 90% of the day. So I'm just going to brain dump onto this prompt and see what it gives me. A couple things that come to mind. Some of the reasons I've rediscovered time tracking are I reconnected Toggle to a Notion database, tracking time. B, set up the automation so that every day it's adding all of the time entries to that same database. And C, using a custom agent to, at the end of each week, send a message to Slack on how I did, where did I spend my time, and what are the recommendations going into next week in terms of where I maybe need to spend or invest more time in terms of category, and or related to existing client projects. Okay. So we've got our text. It is like shockingly good, even if you mess up or you go down a rabbit hole on something and then you need to go back and redirect yourself. It will just edit out all of the things that don't make any sense. So 10 out of 10 recommend. We are waiting for that one. And we're gonna look at a custom agent example on the same topic, just to hopefully give some context as to the more details we add, the better the responses. Yeah, that didn't work. Okay. So let's see if we can reframe this. Okay, we're gonna try that one more time. We're gonna give it a few seconds. Come on, new Jackman. How is this looking? It added it to the prompt. I'm just gonna say, add this to this page. See if it adds it. But it does look like it at least created a draft, which is good. Although it added some social posts there as well. I don't think I asked for. And then we have it in our newsletter page. Definitely something that we need to keep an eye on is it likes to put in stories or anecdotes sometimes that are not real. Like apparently I've worked with over 50 VC clients, which is definitely not the case. So we, as always with anything AI, want to make sure that we are reviewing and cutting out any false or incorrect data, and also adding it to the prompt as much as possible. That's one thing that I started doing, just saying, hey, it's actually like 12 clients, or this never happened, or I think you're thinking about something that I wrote for somebody else. So some things to keep in mind there just in terms of anecdotes. Okay, a couple quick notes before we can have some time for Q&A. Let me just open the slide so that we could highlight some stuff. For the people who voted for the turn ideas into social posts, that's, I think, one of the templates that's in the marketplace. I'll make sure to add the link, but that one has essentially turning anything that you've written into different types of posts, from punchy, like 1-2 lines of text, to a carousel. How do you kind of format it in a way that's like you're scrolling sideways and reading a story there? As I mentioned, custom agents I feel like it's snapping away manual tasks and not half of the universe. So I just want to kind of clarify that. That would be very bad. Let's hope that doesn't happen. But last I checked, I think we're maybe a couple months away from this launching. Number one, at least just from personal experience, starting with a very specific workflow that we have coming up often, that's very manual, starting there and starting specific. This could be very broad and very generic, and we want to make sure that we're building up our muscle of training very specialized agents to do specific things, because I think that's going to help in the short term, and then also help us build up those libraries of instructions when custom agents come out. And also for making things like formatting and how we want the output being as explicit as possible. Curating, this really just has to do with what pages or databases are we giving it access to, and in some cases you might want to add some context as to what lives in those databases. So things to keep in mind there. And I think one thing to highlight here as we're using these tools, whether they're happening in Notion AI or in Notion or elsewhere, is it's very easy to strip away all of the unique human stuff that makes you you. And I think this is where the more we can reference things that we've made or things that we've built, the less we have the output being kind of very generic and robotic. So just want to highlight that the more context you give it, the more we're keeping our own personality active in whatever we're sharing or whatever we're building. So just want to highlight that. And if your Notion AI or if your AI tools are giving outputs that just don't quite sound like you, that's a good motivator to go back to the drawing board, rethink prompts and instructions to see if it can sound like you a little bit more. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate you all. I'll share any resources that we shared here along with an edited version of the video. Otherwise, have a great rest of your Thursdays. Cheers.